I'm 25 years old and I have been married to my wife, who is also 25, for 2 years now. We have known each other for a total of 7 years and have been a couple for 5 of those years. Our marriage has had its share of both happy moments and challenging times, just like any other marriage. My brother, who is 26 years old, has been living in California ever since he got accepted into Stanford University. After completing his studies, he found a job there and has been living in California ever since. Recently, he came back to our hometown for a week-long visit. The reason for his visit was to celebrate our parents' wedding anniversary and my birthday, which happened to be only 3 days apart. About 2 weeks before my brother's visit, I started sensing that something was not quite right. You see, my wife had been on a work trip to Los Angeles the week before, and during that trip, she mentioned that she had met up with my brother. At first, I didn't think much of it because she said they just had lunch and caught up on each other's lives before parting ways. However, when she returned from her trip, things took a strange turn. She seemed distant, and it felt like she was always looking for a reason to argue, even over the smallest things. For instance, I remember one time I accidentally bought a different soap than what she wanted. I immediately apologized and even offered to buy the right one, but she refused. Instead, she accused me of not caring about her at all and went as far as to suggest that I must have been unfaithful with 7 different women in the 7 days she was away. What puzzled me even more was that she started smiling and laughing while texting someone. Naturally, I got curious and tried to peek at her phone, just wanting to understand what was making her so happy. But every time I attempted to take a look, she became furious, calling me a freak who wanted to invade her privacy every single chance I got. Before we left for my parents' house, my wife and I were pretty upset with each other. However, during the car ride there, we decided to put on a show of happiness, as we knew that's what our family expected from us. We arrived at my parents' place around 12:30 p.m. I had to rush to the airport because my brother's flight was landing at 1 p.m. and my parents' home was a 45-minute drive from there. I found my brother waiting for me at the gate and we chatted all the way back home. During our conversation, the topic of my wife came up and I noticed my brother suddenly become a bit down, as if he was burdened by guilt. I had felt that something was not right, so I asked him about it. However, he brushed off my concerns and remained cheerful for the rest of the ride. The rest of the week went as planned. My wife and I continued to pretend that everything was fine while we argued in hushed tones at night. At this point, I strongly suspected that she had been unfaithful during her trip, as I had experienced infidelity in a previous relationship. Little did I know who it was that she had been involved with. The day came when my brother had to leave, and since he needed to be at the airport an hour early, we set off around 4:30 p.m. While we were about halfway there, he mentioned that he needed to talk to me about something important, specifically regarding my wife. Naturally, I asked him to explain what was on his mind, and he requested that I pull over, which I did. Then he dropped a bombshell on me. During the week that my wife was in California, they had slept together. It suddenly clicked why she had been texting him constantly, and it became clear that he was the cause of our recent argument. I felt a surge of anger and I was so close to punching him in the face, but I restrained myself because I needed to hear more. I must have looked furious because he quickly added that it was a mistake and he had planned to confess as soon as he got back. He claimed that he loved me deeply and said that's why he couldn't bring himself to tell me sooner. But in that moment, I couldn't reconcile his action with his words. If he truly loved me, he wouldn't have betrayed me like this. I couldn't bear to have him in the car with me any longer. So I told him to get out and find a cab. As far as I was concerned, he was dead to me. I drove to my best friend's house and there I poured out everything that had happened. I explained the whole situation to him and asked him if I could stay at his place for the night. He kindly agreed and I texted my mom to let him know that I wouldn't be home that night because a friend needed me. It seemed like my brother might have informed my wife that I was aware of her action, as my phone was bombarded with texts and calls from her. Some of the messages said things like, "Where are you? Please come home. I really miss you." And "I need to talk to you right now. Please come home." Feeling overwhelmed, I decided to turn off my phone for the time being, and that's when I started writing this. Now, I'm reaching out to you, the strangers on Reddit, for advice. What should I do in this situation? Should I confront my wife about what I know, or should I consider filing for divorce? Your insight and guidance would be greatly appreciated. Now, here's my take on this story. At first, it might have seemed like your wife and brother's affair might have been a one-time mistake, maybe a momentary lapse in judgment. But the fact that they continue to text each other after they slept together suggests that it might have been premeditated and they intend to continue. The reason why he may have confessed is he felt guilty when he saw how much love you have for him. Simply by picking him up from the airport just reminded him that you are indeed his brother. If at all, that needs to be reminded. So he confessed. One thing to point out is your wife never intended to confess to you. Although the story lacks some details, we can assume that the brother's confession was weighing heavily on his conscience, possibly implying that he didn't initiate the affair. On the other hand, your wife's lack of remorse and her tendency to become angry over minor issues upon return from California suggests that subconsciously she was deflecting and blaming you for her affair. In light of this circumstance, it seemed reasonable to consider divorce as the only option. Rebuilding trust after such betrayal is incredibly difficult. As for your brother, maintaining distance and skepticism is wise. While it's possible to work on regaining your trust over time, it would be very challenging. And I would recommend that you keep a distance away from him till you heal and ready to confront that situation, because you're family and you seem like a close-knit family. So you have events, frequent events. So which means that there will be a time where you have to confront him again. I think you should also share it with your parents as well, because betrayal like this has to be exposed, and sunlight is the best disinfectant. Thank you for enjoying this short story. Please do support the channel by liking and subscribing. And also drop your comments, tell me what you think about the story, and give your advice to the original poster. Thank you and